The Mavericks did it, y'all. They took Game 2 on the road in OKC, and it looked like a pretty good win. Now, obviously, there are a lot of different reasons why Dallas was able to win this game, but I think the two that I want to focus on first, and perhaps the most prevalent, were the play of PJ Washington and Tim Hardaway Jr. Now, as good as PJ was, I'm going to start with Tim Hardaway, because in my last video, actually, I kind of criticized the amount of time that Tim Hardaway got in Game 1. I wasn't sure if that was what's best for the team. But at the same time, I did also say I'd like to see him get some minutes early on, see if he can get going. And then maybe, if the Thunder are pulling away at some point, maybe put him in and see if he can get something going. And that's if, the rest of the team can't really get the offense going, see if he can kind of jumpstart it. And that's exactly what he did in this game, He came in early. He got, I think, 4 points. And I don't remember if it was to Lively or Gafford, but he threw a lob that looked pretty nice. So that's something I like to see from Tim Hardaway, that he's not just scoring. He was playing in the flow of the offense. He wasn't stopping the ball. He was, playing with the team. And when Tim Hardaway's doing that, it's kind of hard to dislike him. So hopefully this is the kind of play we'll be able to get from him going forward. Obviously, he's not going to, what did he do? Score like 10 points in 10 minutes or whatever it was. He had 17 points in 18 minutes overall. But, in the third quarter, when the Thunder were putting on a comeback and it was kind of looking like this game might get away from the Mavericks, it was Tim Hardaway who stepped up, started hitting shots, put it out of reach again. Maybe not out of reach, but, at a comfortable distance for Luka and Kyrie to come back in and kind of take over and keep the game steady going forward. But now that we've sung the praises of Tim Hardaway, let's focus on PJ Washington. This game right here, this is exactly what I wanted from PJ when we traded for him at the trade deadline. He's the kind of player that you're not depending on him to win you a series. He's not going to win you a series with his play, but he can win you a game, and that's exactly what he did in Game 2. Now, if you just focus on his scoring, he finished with 29 points and went 7 for 11 from behind the three-point line. And that alone is a great game, but he also finished with 11 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, and I believe it was 1 block. So obviously you're not going to get this kind of production from him every game, but just playing with this kind of energy, and if he can continue to hit threes at a relatively high rate, this is the perfect player you want on your team. He plays good defense, he can win you a game here or there, and he's just a great energy guy and culture guy to have on the team. I don't really watch the halftime show that often, but I had it on, and I was kind of listening to it while I was on my computer while I was waiting for the second half to start, and Bob... What's Bob's name? The guy who was the GM for the Warriors. Whatever, he's on ESPN now. He's like a Stephen Head talking guy now. But did I say Stephen Head? I meant Stephen A. Smith. I think I mixed up Stephen A. Smith and Talking Head, but whatever. That's not important. But he said PJ Washington wasn't going to keep up that pace. He's not going to finish with, 38 points is what he said. And I was like, he might not finish with 38, but he might finish with 30. And he almost did, finished with 29. So technically he was right. He didn't finish with 38, but he did keep having a really good game, even after the first half. But now that we talked about those two guys, let's focus on Luka Doncic. Now, going into this game, his health was kind of a big question mark. And he kind of, put us all at ease. From a Mavericks fan perspective at least. He came out of the gates firing. He had 8 quick points, I think it was. And then he hit the ground pretty hard, smacked his face right on the floor. And, it was kind of like is he okay? And certainly throughout the game, Luka wasn't at full capacity. He wasn't the best version of Luka we've ever seen. But he was a lot better than Game 1, and that's what we need. He was hitting shots when we needed him. He hit it He hit a 3 late in the fourth quarter to keep the Thunder at distance, and he played just a really good game overall, and that's the kind of play we need from Luka. Now, Derrick Jones Jr. played pretty well, as always, but this is kind of where I want to start looking at things that might worry me looking forward. We'll come back to Derrick Jones Jr., but Daniel Gafford, he had a pretty solid game. But he hurt his hand or his wrist blocking a shot or trying to block a shot, and it really was affecting him. So hopefully that won't be a problem going forward into game 3 in the series as it goes on. But it looked like it was really bothering him, and that's too bad, because if we want to win this series and keep going farther in the playoffs, we're going to need Daniel Gafford to be Daniel Gafford. And then Derek Lively also. So overall, I'd say Derek Lively had a good game. He played good defense. He played with a lot of energy out there. He was making things happen. But the one thing is, he was getting in pretty good position around the rim a lot, but he wasn't finishing. I think he only had 1 field goal in the whole game. And that's definitely not what you want from one of your primary big men. So if we're going to continue to have this success in the series, Derek Lively's going to need to start finishing around the rim more. And that's something I think he can do. He's done it in the past, but we're going to need him to just, finish at a little bit higher rate than 1 for 7. Also, just to touch on it real quickly, Maxi Kleber out for the series. This isn't new news, but I haven't talked about it, and that's just a really big blow to the Mavericks. He was a guy that I thought was going to be big for guarding Chet in this series if he was going to be healthy. And he won't be reevaluated for another, 3 weeks. So that could affect the next series too if the Mavericks move on. And if we're playing like the Timberwolves, I think that could be a big blow to like guarding people like Karl Anthony Towns. If they have Gobert and Cat in at the same time, I think maybe a lineup of like Gafford and Maxey in at the same time could be a good way to combat that. And without Maxey, that kind of limits our defensive versatility and what we can do on the defensive side. So hopefully Maxey gets better, not just for basketball, but all those reasons. But moving on to Kyrie Irving. Now, Kyrie Irving, I would say he had a good game this game. He had like 11 assists or whatever. He was playing in the flow of the offense. He looked good out there, played good defense, which he's been doing all playoffs. But he only had, I think it was 9 points. I guess I could check. Yeah, 9 points, 2 for 8 from the field. And, that's not something you want to see from Kyrie Irving. The reason Kyrie Irving is out there is for his scoring a lot of the time. But that's okay, because people like Tim Hardaway and PJ were able to step up. And I think that probably gives you at least a little bit of confidence going forward, because it's like, well, PJ and Tim Hardaway, they can't do this every game. But also, Kyrie Irving's not going to score 9 points every game. He's due to have a 30-point game, 25-point game. Those are the kind of games that Kyrie usually has. So when you're not getting it from PJ or Tim, you'll get it from Kyrie. Luka will have his games, and the in between. But all that being said, can we win this series moving forward? It's going to be 2 games at home now in Dallas. And can the Mavericks defend home court? Obviously, I think they can. Maybe more likely is them splitting them 1-1. But a lot of that depends on how banged up the Mavericks are. They're starting to look a little banged up. Maxey's out for the series, Luka's accumulating little hits and bumps here and there. Gafford hit his hand on the glass, and, I don't know how bad that'll be. We'll see if it affects him in the next game or if he'll be fine by then. But if the Mavericks want to win this series, we're going to need our best players out on the court playing basketball, especially against a team like this, like the Thunder. They're a pretty deep team, and everyone on that team that they play on the court is pretty much a score to threat. Even Gordon Hayward, who I think still hasn't scored a single point in the playoffs. But that's a guy you got to worry about at least a little bit when he's out there. He's a one-time All-Star. Even earlier in this season on the Hornets, he was having really good games. So it's in there within him to have a good game here or there. But he certainly hasn't showed it. He certainly hasn't showed it in this playoffs. But yeah, if the Mavericks can be relatively healthy going forward in this series, I think it's looking fairly decent for them. They have these 2 games at home. Hopefully win both of them, or at least split them, so then it'll be at 3-1 or 2-2, and then it gets into a bit of a scrape from there. And I think I'd lean towards the Mavericks in that scenario. I'm not a big they're not experienced, they're too young kind of person. I usually don't weigh that too heavily, but I think it's the playoffs. We're getting to like game 6 and 7. If we get that far, that could maybe play a factor. But, you know, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he was second in MVP voting for a reason. He's a great player, and that might not matter at all. So, you know, we'll just have to wait and see about that. Oh yeah, and one last thing before I go. I wanted to talk about Derrick Jones Jr. a little bit. This isn't about this playoffs or this season at all, but we signed him to a 1-year contract, a veteran minimum, and the Mavericks don't really have any money, so he's not going to be around next year, or at least it seems like he won't be around next year. Maybe they'll be able to figure something out, but I am not counting on him being back because I don't think they'll be able to afford him. He's playing really well. He had the best season of his career. He's playing pretty darn well in the playoffs. There are going to be teams that want him, and this might be his one and only season on the Mavericks. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully we can figure something out. But, you know, if we want to utilize Derrick Jones Jr.'s talents as a role player, you know, we need to do it this year. But, yeah, that was the last point I wanted to make. But, yeah, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to talk about the Mavericks real quick, about the Game 2 and going forward in the playoffs and going forward in this series. But I appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. If you're not subscribed, maybe subscribe so you don't miss the next video. And if you're already subscribed, then hey, I appreciate you guys. But that's it for me today. I'll see you guys later. Peace.